Welcome. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to create and publish your podcast. It's free. That's right, free to download. With built-in tools to help you record and edit your podcast from your cell phone or any smart device. Anchor also distributes your podcast on virtually any platform that streams podcasts, like Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple and Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even monetize your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is your one-stop app for podcasting. Remember, it's free. Go to anchor.fm to create some amazing content. Powered by Riverside. Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, sponsored by Anchor and produced by Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. We are now streaming everywhere you listen to your favorite podcast episodes. You can watch most of our interviews via Spotify or our YouTube channel, Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. Our podcast covers 4 areas: domestic violence, human and sex trafficking, sexually based offenses, and true crime. Each episode ends with a missing person case, runaway kidnapping, or abduction. 99% of these cases are melanated folks to help bring more media coverage and resolution. If you are triggered at any time during this episode and need immediate medical attention, please call 911. In the UK, call 999. If you don't have an urgent need but still want help, we provide multiple resources in the show notes. We provide the numbers and websites for domestic violence, human and sex trafficking, and RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. If you have substance abuse issues, alcohol or drugs, we provide the numbers and websites for Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and Al-Anon. Finally, if you or anyone feels suicidal, please call 988. This number is available 24/7 and toll-free here in the United States. Our guest today is Jerrilyn Fabien. She's a multi-certified individual in metaphysical modalities as a master Reiki and Neuro-Linguistic programming practitioner, energy healer, behavior and wellness coach, and she's a public speaker. Jerrilyn, prior to our recording of this episode, demonstrated with me and on me how NLP works. I wasn't even able to finish my pot roast afterwards. I'm just telling y'all. Thank you, Jerrilyn, and welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. What's good with you, my friend?
I'm doing awesome. How about you?
You know, I'm always in great company when I talk to Reiki master practitioners and people that specialize in NLP, because we did an NLP session. You know, you got me that day. I'm telling you. That pot roast that I made, it took me hours to eat it.
It took you hours.
It took
It
hours to eat.
it must not have been a strong desire to release it then, because you would look at that and be like, I don't want it.
We're going to dive into all of this stuff. I want to start
Yeah.
off by welcoming you not only to the podcast. I want you to tell us some things about yourself before we really deep dive into the topics that we're going to be talking about, because we're going to be talking about channeling your traumas into triumphs and how Reiki and NLP works with helping people overcome those things. So tell us about you.
Sure. So some aspects of my story I'll share as examples as we're talking about NLP. But as I heard you saying that you enjoy being in the presence of Reiki practitioners and the practitioners, what came to my mind is you have that same power within, right? And so that is what I seek to help people to recognize, that same power within me exists within you, right? And that was a very empowering process to discover. So, I'm from the Caribbean. You hear my accent. I always like people to know that I'm from the island of Dominica, not to be mistaken with Dominican Republic. All right, small
Dominica.
island. Yes.
Where
It's
is
a
that?
small island. So if I ask you if you know where Martinique is, do you?
Yes.
You know where Martinique is. Some people do not. So I'll say Saint Lucia. Many people know where Saint Lucia is. It's a small island, very close in proximity to Saint Lucia. All right.
So we're talking about the U.S. Virgin Islands.
No, it's
Oh,
way
way.
south from the
Oh,
Virgin Islands. Right.
I'm too far
So this
south.
is an island that was once under the British, under the French, and then we were colonized by the British until our independence in '78.
Okay.
Okay, so very small island, beautiful island, and 289 square miles, about 68,000 people, very very small,
Okay.
and that's where I grew up. Um, I encountered I while it was a very beautiful island and I appreciate my upbringing, there were some traumas that I had to work through as a child, right? And trauma looks different for everybody. Interestingly, I wrote an article featured in a magazine recently, and a friend who knew me growing up mentioned that I thought everything was fine and you guys were just very supportive. And yes, we're going to talk about that too in terms of perception, right?
Right.
In NLP, right? But I grew up in a home with a father who struggled with bipolar disorder, mental
Okay.
illness. And my interpretation of what I experienced led me to conclude some things about myself, right? This must mean this since this is what I'm encountering, right? And for years, that programming was running on repeat, unbeknownst to me, right? Until later on in my years when I realized quite often the very thing that you're triggered by leads or serves as the process for you to come back home to yourself, and that was my experience. I got very close to someone, and I did not encounter anybody at the time who saw me as clearly as this person saw me, but it also triggered me because um, some of the very experiences that I encountered growing up, I experienced with this person. They had their own stuff that they were dealing with, and that led me to really pay attention. One thing I knew: if I'm getting the same circumstances over and over again, I'm seeing a cycle here. There's only one common denominator, and that's me, right? So at that point, I decided to go inward. My I've always I've always been led to the helping field. So my first degree is in behavioral science. My master's is in rehab counseling. And I've always worked with individuals in the helping field. First with children, then with seniors, and now I work with specifically women who are seeking to release that emotional baggage so that they can be well, thrive in constant flow, right? Hence the name of my business, Constant Flow
In
Behavior and
constant
Wellness.
flow.
Yes, right? Funny story, some years ago, I was meditating and I saw this shape in my meditation, this spiral. And I I knew it meant something, right? And I went in search. What does this mean? I'm looking all over the internet. What does a spiral mean, right? And when I discovered its meaning, I knew it was a personal thing for me, right? Going through the cycles of life and understanding that everything is connected and everything continues to expand from the inside out, right? Which is why I use that symbol in my logo as well, right? So that's just a little thing about me. There's so much more that I will share as we talk about it.
Jerrilyn,
Yes.
I'm very intrigued about these non-traditional therapies.
Now,
Reiki.
can I interject?
Yep,
I
go
do
go
not
ahead.
use the word therapy.
What do you use?
Modalities.
Modalities.
It's
I'm
a
sorry. And
safer word because
no, no,
people.
you're right, because that's what I put in the title. So
Yeah,
I had a brain freeze for a second. So
I'm good.
sorry, my eyes water. I don't know what's going on.
I'm
Okay.
tracking with you.
modalities.
Mhm.
That's important because, again, we're talking about changing people's mindset, getting them to think outside
Right.
of the box, doing shit outside of the box. And again, we have uncensored conversations. So you say what it is what you say. Okay, because
Yes,
there's adults
sir.
talking to adults. All right, modalities.
Modalities.
How does that differ from therapy?
For me, personally, it's just a label.
Sure,
For me, it's just a label. It's a safer label to use. Modality, the word modality just suggests a different way of doing things, a different framework, a different viewpoint, a different strategy to do things. And that could involve so many things. In my practice with my clients, you mentioned Reiki. So
mhm,
I use Reiki, NLP. I use Bach flower remedies. That's a homeopathic flower remedy to help. It's all about helping the client to get to a place of alignment. That's my passion. Helping people to get to the place where they see themselves as the source within them sees them, right? And so those are just different strategies to help. When we get into therapy, we're getting into um, a line of practice for me that involves very strict ethical guidelines. Not that the others do not,
sure.
but it's for me, it's about the legalities associated with the term therapy, and I veer off from that. You will find therapists using Reiki, you will find therapists using NLP, but as a practitioner, it gives me the what's the word I'm looking for here? Flexibility
Okay.
to function without that strict guideline to do things a particular way. But with that flexibility is not just to do my own thing. It's the freedom to say what does the client need in this time that I can provide to them and look to the best means to assist the client so that they can shift, right?
When we're talking about modalities, specifically NLP, and again, that's neuro-linguistic programming.
Right.
And when you're talking to people about those as an alternative to a traditional modality, like a CBT or like one of the new tools, EMDR, how do you market that to someone who is shopping, for lack of a better term,
Hmm.
for some help for a sexual based offense, a domestic violence situation? Maybe they were trafficked. Uh, how do you talk to them about sitting in your virtual space or in person? Because I'm sure you have done both, especially with the pandemic.
Yes. This is actually I'm in my office right now. So
Okay.
yeah. And I do virtual sessions as well. That's an interesting question. I've never been asked that before. But I'll say this. I like people to see themselves as I speak. So even as we do this discussion, my intention is to have people see themselves in the conversation that they're having so that in the process of seeing themselves, they can naturally identify if, oh, this can help me. Everything she's saying, I get it because I've done that. I've been there, right? So
Yes.
with regard to NLP, that's why I love this modality because I believe most people, if not all, can identify with it. And here's the thing about NLP: you've been a product, you've been you've made a decision, you have been influenced by the modality of NLP, whether you know it or not. If you've ever bought something based on an ad you saw on social media, if you've ever found yourself looking at that one show on TV and you just can't seem to figure out why you can't stop, if you've bought some food item based on an ad that just looks so juicy and sweet, and you said, I have to have that. Remember some time ago, was it Chick fil A?
Yeah, the big
Oh,
chicken
Popeyes. It was
sandwiches.
Popeyes. It was
Popeyes, yeah,
Popeyes
the
that
big
had that.
chicken
What
sandwich.
was it?
The big
It was
chicken
that
sandwich.
chicken sandwich, and
Yeah.
everybody. What was that?
I never did.
What
I
was
never ate
that?
it. I was like,
You
"Nope,
were, but
nope."
some people stood in line for hours
Yeah.
because they just had to get it. What made you think you had to get it? Right? You were acting as a result of the programming that occurred. Right? Now, if you're just casually being programmed all the time by a billboard, by the ads on TV, by your own language patterns that you created from childhood, right? You've been doing so subconsciously, right? The intention of neuro-linguistic, and I'm going to explain the term neuro-linguistic programming shortly, right? But the intention is to get you to a place where you bridge the gap between that subconscious and your conscious so that you get to a place where control is not the word, but you're in charge,
Okay.
right? You get to determine what you give access to, right? So when we're talking about neuro-linguistic programming, the word neuro has to do with our nervous system, right? And our mind and the messages that we receive from the mind via our five senses. So we're talking about our sight, our sense of smell, touch, right? What did I miss out? Hearing, right? Those five senses.
And taste.
Linguistic has to do with our communication pattern. Now, when you hear the word linguistic, what comes to your mind?
Words, dialogue,
Word, dialogue, right? Language.
language.
So it has to do with communication, but we don't just communicate with our words, right? Through those five senses, we interpret communication by pictures, sounds. We spoke about the ads, right? So we receive that communication all the time. We receive those communications all the time. Sounds, pictures, um, a particular feeling that you have as a result of experiencing something, right? And then the programming, sorry, has to do with the patterns that are created based on those communications that we receive. All right, so that's in essence what neuro-linguistic programming is. Um, so there are four themes, I would say, focus areas of NLP, right? And I'm going to try and break that down by sharing an experience shortly. So, one of the themes is that perception is interpretation. It seems very simple to me, but pretty much how you perceive a thing is how you're going to interpret it, right?
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever seen, when I was in elementary school, there was a story, a poem about some blind men who had to feel an elephant to try to interpret what that elephant was. And one person touched the trunk of the elephant and thought it was a snake. Another person touched the leg and thought it was a big trunk of a tree. Somebody else touched the side of the elephant and thought it was a wall. Someone touched the tail and thought it was a rope, right? Somebody else touched the ears and thought it was a fan, right? What do you call
The tusk.
the tusk? Someone else thought it was a spear just from touching, right? They were blind and they were just relying on their sense of touch. Their perception of what that was caused them to come to a particular interpretation, right? And that
Mm.
happens all the time. I posted recently a meme I saw where someone said, "This is how easy." I think it said something to the fact that this is how easy people argue over stuff. And the sentence was there was a picture of what I perceived to be a stone, okay? But there was
Okay.
a picture and the person said, "This is a rock." And I said, "No, this is a stone." And somebody else said, "No, this is a crystal." And somebody else said, "No, this is a pebble," right? Perception. And we argue and argue and argue about what this is without realizing that everybody's interpretation is different based on how they perceive that thing to be. And perception is linked to so many. We talk about communication based on your culture, based on your religious upbringing, based on so many factors. We come to particular interpretations based on how we perceive a thing. All right. So that's one of the themes. Recognizing that helps the client to examine their beliefs surrounding certain things, right? Because people hold on to trauma sometimes. They hold on to beliefs about themselves just based on a perception, all right? A perception about that thing which was linked to belief pattern, all right? So the other
Right.
one is that empowerment is measured through cause and effect. And what that means is that until someone is able to recognize, let me say that differently. Let me say that differently. Someone becomes empowered. I'm using the same word here. Someone becomes empowered when they are able to recognize that my actions led to this. My
Okay.
thought patterns create these results. This choice that I made led to this result, right? When you're able to make the connection between cause and effect, you're empowered to change, right? You're empowered to change. The minute I'm able to see, okay, there's only one common denominator here. I'm talking about me years ago. Didn't know anything about NLP. But in that moment, I was empowered to say, okay, if I created this, what can I do to change it?
Right.
Right? Without
Right.
that, you're disempowered because then you're relying on everything external to change so that you can feel better. That's never an empowering position. Okay? So the
Okay.
other one, the other theme is the mind, body, and energy connection. Recognizing that they're not separate. There's no such thing as your mind being over there, your body over here, and energy. It's all interconnected. It's one, right? I believe because for so many years you've had different fields of study focusing on one area. So in the field of science, we focus, well, in physics you find people focusing on energy, right? Biology, you hear people talking about the brain and the spinal cord and how they're connected, right?
Yes.
Spirituality may focus on mind and mindfulness and all of those things, and so everybody's been focusing on them in isolated isolated sections, right? And then because of that, you have individuals that are realizing that it's connected. It's always been connected. But to bring it all together, we have to still identify them on an individual level: mind, body, energy. They're all one, right? They are
Right.
interconnected, and your thoughts create things. Your thoughts lead and create your your way of being, the way you feel, and what happens as a result of that. You with me so far?
I'm with you.
Okay. So the final one is linked to that cause and effect, right? And that is the responsibility for change. I said it earlier. If I create this, and it's a hard thing, especially on this topic and the type of podcast that you do. I tread a little softly with that because you get questions like, what did this person do to deserve this?
Mm.
Or, and I don't think anybody deserves to be treated in an unfair means where they're taken advantage of, but you get questions like, how did this person create this situation? How did they attract this particular experience, right? It's not about what happened in the past, right? And there we could have a whole conversation on that question alone, trust me,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And it
Oh
has to do with the topic of energy, all right? And it has to do with the intentions that you set forth even before coming to this world, because I do believe that we existed before we entered this physical body and there
yeah.
was no separatedness. That's why I said mind, body, energy, they're all connected, right? But that being said, right, The moment I recognize I experienced this thing, are there other individuals who may be responsible for what happened? Yes. And I am the individual at question here who is seeking and wanting and setting intentions and desires to expand. That does not rely on anybody else but me. And so the moment you take responsibility for your life, it creates it leads you to the point where you can change towards what you desire to be. All right. So you look like you had a thought happening there.
My ADD is kicking in,
Let me
and
hear you.
I'm really trying not to interrupt. I'm striving not to.
Mhm.
Here's what I thought about.
Mhm.
When we talked before, I said, you know what? I got one question with 27 parts that I want
Okay.
to ask Daryl. But I'm not going to do that because Mrs. LP hates when I do that. So I'm not
Okay.
going to do that. That's a whole nother conversation. We'll talk about that off camera. Okay.
Mhm.
I want you to go into how Reiki
Ooh.
applies with trauma,
With trauma. Okay.
specifically the ones that we're focusing on, which is the domestic violence and sexually based offenses.
Okay. Sure. So I'm going to tie that in with NLP. Okay. I'm going to tie that in with NLP, and I love that
Go,
question.
go ahead. You got the mic.
Okay. So we're talking about energy, right? Energy cannot be destroyed. It shifts from one form to another, right? And you have, I like talking about this vibrational scale, emotional vibrational scale, all right?
Okay.
So imagine you have a pyramid. If you've ever seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, imagine a pyramid looking like that.
Yeah.
But instead of the needs, you're going to change those levels to emotions. And there are a number of emotions, right? From
Right.
the bottom all the way to the very top.
Mhm.
At the very bottom, you have emotions of guilt, shame, despair, existing on a very low vibration. As we work up, that moves to anger, that moves to discontentment, jealousy. Notice my hand is going up, okay?
Mhm.
Jealousy, that may move to a place of, did I say contentment? After jealousy, a place of contentment, even boredom, acceptance, and you're going up and up and up the scale until you get to a place of unconditional love. Now, here's the thing, we hear it all the time. Love is the acceptable way. Everybody needs to love, to love, to love. How on earth are you going to experience love when everything that you've experienced in your life has taught you to feel ashamed, unworthy, and
Mhm.
guilty,
That's right.
right?
Right.
And so when you're in that emotional state, your body is your body holds on to those emotions, right? So let me try and explain this. The experiences that you have had, the beliefs that you hold to, is stored in your body in the form of emotions.
Okay.
Those emotions, that's really energy. That's energy that's being stored in your body, right? So someone encounters some form of sexual trauma,
Mhm.
right? I'm going to tie it into NLP. Something happens, right? And one of three things occurs when that thing happens. In order for you to come to whatever conclusion that causes you to live and survive and whatever, you either delete aspects of that information, you distort, or you generalize. You delete,
Delete, distort,
distort,
or
or
generalize.
generalize, right? Just to make sense of whatever happened. Now, as a result of that, right, it creates an internal representation, right?
Yes.
That internal representation, and I'm gonna paint a picture of what that looks like using an example of myself. All right, creates a state, right? It creates a state, And that state affects how you feel. It affects your physiology, right? So let me give you an example. I was 4 years old. All right. I told you earlier that my dad had bipolar disorder. So
Right.
I was 4 years old, and listen to the words that I'm using. I've said this story quite a bit, but now I'm going to say it intentionally so you pick up the way in which we create an interpretation based on what happened, right? So I know I was 4 years old, and I was in preschool, and what I know is that there was supposed to be a picnic, right?
Okay.
So there was a picnic, and I was 4 years old. I don't think my mother told my dad where I was going. I don't know how he found out, right? And she maybe didn't tell him because she thought, he would not want me to go. So here I was. I had a green kit. Those little, I don't know if they had them up here, but when I was younger, there was a little green kit with a little flask inside of it. I had
When you
a
say
green
you're talking about a lunchbox, basically.
oh, thank you, lunchbox. We used to call
Okay.
them kits.
Okay.
Thank you. So those lunch boxes, I had a green one,
Because you said
and
flash, and I was like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
okay,
So,
thank you.
so stop thinking about alcohol, folks. When she says flash, flash is not just for alcohol. Okay. Just
Thank you. So in preschool, I had a green kit or flask lunchbox, and in that was a Malta. You know Malta?
no.
It's a brown. It is what is in Malta? Harlot. It looks almost like a beer, but it's non-alcoholic. Okay, I was in preschool, but in the Caribbean we drink Malta as well. So I remember having a Malta. I had my snack, whatever snack that was, and while I was in school and we were waiting for um for the bus to arrive so we could leave, my dad came to the school and he came to get me. So I'm guessing the teachers felt like it was unsafe to let me leave with him, so they called the police. The
Okay.
police came to the preschool, and I remember there being a tug of war between my dad and the police, right? And I was in the middle with my lunch box, and I remember the lunch box falling on the ground. The Malta broke because it was in a glass bottle. It broke, splattered all over me. My snacks fell all over the place. Um, and that was all I remembered in
Okay.
that moment. Of course, it was very scary,
Yeah.
right? The next thing I remembered was being at the picnic. Now, I need to say this. Growing up, I don't know if that has changed now, but growing up in the Caribbean, if we say we're going to a picnic, we're going to the beach. Okay? We're not going to a park to watch animals. We're going to the beach.
To the beach.
The distinction is if they say we're having a dry picnic. A dry picnic means there's no water involved. Okay?
Okay.
I imagine in my adult self that when my dad heard that we're going to a picnic, he thought somebody was going to take his child to the beach, and that was not going to happen under his watch, right?
Okay.
So here it is. That scene happened. The next thing my mind remembers is being at the picnic. So I ended up being there. I can't tell you what happened after that scene, but I end up at the picnic and everything else was a blur. I just remember just being there and things happening around me.
Okay.
From this place, I know that something happened, right? With regard to NLP, I deleted some details. Whatever happened in between there, I don't know, but I deleted that, right? I remember the most traumatic incident, but somehow the space between over there and at the picnic, I don't remember. I don't remember what I did. I know that as a child I was very fun, talkative, playful, but I just remember just being there. I remember seeing a horse, and that was about it.
Okay.
So that incident, believe it or not, subconsciously played on my mind like a loop for over 30 years. I didn't realize it, like a loop. I didn't even realize what would trigger that event to come up. Okay. So when I started paying attention, what I realized is I interpreted that. It's interesting, the stories we create, right? Perception is interpretation. I didn't understand what happened. As far as I remember, that was the first time I even realized that something was different about my dad. Okay. But in that moment, I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed. And I concluded that that was a way of him making me feel bad. Right. And I perceived somehow I came to a conclusion that it was his way of rejecting me, right?
Oh,
So I associated that with rejection. If you could embarrass me, you're pushing me away, right? So anytime there was a situation where I felt embarrassed or I felt rejected, go figure why that relationship would have been a trigger, right? Then I go back to that 4-year-old child,
okay, okay.
right? Now, it doesn't matter what your age is. When you're triggered, we're not dealing with adult Jerrilyn, we're not dealing with adult Larry, right? So I've had clients come to me and say, I don't know why in that moment I just felt like I was 3 again. I was 4 again. Yeah, because your brain doesn't know the difference. Our brain doesn't have a concept of time, right? It doesn't have a concept of time. Whatever is happening now, whatever is happening in this state, is like it was happening back then.
Right.
Right? And so that is why it is significant then to help to reorganize those language patterns. I'm going back to the question you asked about Reiki. Your body stores those emotions in different centers. We have different emotional centers in our body. You'll hear them called chakras. I like using the word emotional centers because I don't want words to create resistance for people to have access to their healing, right? The word
Okay.
chakras creates different feelings and emotions for people, right? But if I say you have emotional centers in your body, places where you hold on to emotions, positive and not pleasant experience, emotion, sorry, right? And in those centers, based on the experiences that you've had, it causes you to not only feel a certain way, but it causes your body to respond physically, right? I like to say it like this. Something happens, your body stores these emotions. When you become aware, sometimes you're feeling a certain way, you don't even realize that that's not normal, right? I was explaining to a client yesterday, there's a heavy feeling sometimes that you may feel in your chest, your heart, your throat, some tightness in your throat. And for some people, that's just normal. You never felt anything but that, and you didn't know there was another way to feel, right? And all that means is that there have been emotions that you've been holding on to for a long, long time, and you were oblivious to those emotions. And that's okay because all it tells me is that you've experienced something, and that's your body's subtle way of saying, hey, pay attention, right? Whatever emotion you're holding on to is not serving you. And the only reason you're feeling this way is because that energy space within you, that force within you, is holding space for that expanded version of you. So there's a discord between how you're feeling right now and how that expanded version of you sees you. That's the only reason you're feeling that discord, right? So I'll give you an example. We're talking about sexual trauma, for example,
Yes.
stored in the sacral emotional center, right? That second chakra, around just below your navel area, right? And so some people, I work with numerous women, and very often we do a Reiki session. All I do is explain the emotional centers and the blockages that I felt in that region, and I explain the factors that could lead to that. So nobody comes in saying at first, oh, yeah, I was molested when I was a child, or this happened to me. I'm just explaining this is what could possibly cause this. And I'll ask questions such as, um, did you struggle with menstrual cramps growing up? Right? And I had someone say to me, yeah, I mean, it was bad. Like I would have fevers for 2 days. And I'm explaining, right? When we ignore the emotions, your body starts talking to you.
Okay.
Physical symptoms, you're feeling it now, right? And as I was explaining that, then the client said to me, yeah, this happened when I was a child. So you're able to see the correlation between what I'm feeling, what I'm holding on to emotionally, right? What my body is saying to me, right? And you connected the experiences that you've happened that created that. Now, if you can recognize that this experience that I had created a thought pattern that created these emotions, then like NLP says, now you have the response. You saw the cause and effect. Now you're responsible for the change, right? Make
That's right.
sense?
That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Here, here's another question for you.
Uh-huh.
During these sessions,
Mhm.
when you're doing Reiki or NLP, how do you, as the subject matter expert, as the practitioner, determine this person would do better with Reiki or this person would do better with an NLP session? How do you make that determination?
I don't separate them.
Okay.
So when you come to me, unless somebody has resistance towards energy healing, most
Okay.
people know me as a Reiki practitioner, but I don't separate them, right?
Okay.
Um, it all depends on the length of session that someone is coming for. All right. If you're coming for a 45-minute session, which is the shortage package, right? If you're coming for a 45-minute session, you're not going to get both of them, right? I'm probably going to focus on Reiki and give you the tools so that you can be empowered to make some changes. But if a person is coming in for a 90-minute session, we're doing this, while we're doing the session, you're being led through an NLP practice, and there are various practices, right? Various areas of focus that people may want to um, may need assistance with. So it could be a belief change, and there's a process for that. All right. With you, I did the like versus dislike, something that you want to give up, a habit that you want to give up, right? Um, for some individuals, it may be working through, I spoke about that thought, not just a belief, but a thought that's on loop, or it could be a habit that you want to install. All right, you're procrastinating quite a bit and you want to develop a new habit where you're more proactive, right?
Okay.
The beauty for me in merging the two is that, let me use an example with an addiction. It's possible that you can do an NLP session, right? I've done it with individuals who are addicted to a particular, let's say, a particular, not just a habit, but even cigarettes.
Okay.
And after that session, you will never want another cigarette. But I'm not just concerned about you giving up the cigarette. The reason you're addicted, and the reason why it's easy for that to happen, is because I explained this to you the last time we spoke. It's not. There's nothing pleasant about the taste of a cigarette. I don't
Right.
care how people describe it. I remember the first time I had beer, I was like, this thing tastes disgusting. I don't get the addiction. I don't get why people have to have beer. That's just me personally. No judgment. That's just me. But I get that it's not about the taste. I don't care what anybody know. This one tastes better. It's not about the taste. You have made some association, right, with that beer, whether it has to do with the feeling that you get, whether it has to do with the lightness that you experience, and you make it about the taste, but it's not. That is why when somebody goes through the process, they can eliminate that thing, right?
Okay.
But there's something else going on with that behavior, with that pattern. It's not just about the beer. It's about whatever is going on with you that is leading to the addictive behavior. So I want to deal with the emotions that is leading you to either numb, delete, generalize, and use their excuse. After we've eliminated the bear, it makes it easy to create space, right? So you can actually deal with what else is going on. And that's where the Reiki session comes in, because quite often people are not even aware of those subconscious patterns. But the Reiki session helps to eliminate, let me use a different word, create space. Notice what I'm doing. You heard me quite often saying, let me say that better. That's all of that is NLP.
Okay.
All right. All of that is NLP. And I do this with my clients as well. Right. How can we say that better? Because your brain is paying attention, right? Your brain is saying, and I'm doing that with words, but there are other means in which, even with what we look at, how can you look at the same thing? Two people look at the same thing and see something completely different. So if even by what you view, right, and your perception is not leading you to a space of alignment, okay, how can we look at this situation better? Recognize as well that my language patterns may reveal the best means, and people in advertisement, they know this, right? They know the words to use to get you to respond a certain way. So
Yeah.
based on the words that I'm using with you, just by speaking with you, you may hear me most likely saying, how does that look? Let's look at this different. What do you see? Clearly, I'm using visual terms. So if you want to communicate with me, right? And you start telling me about how something feels. I happen to be one of those people who, there's a word for it, doesn't come to my mind right now, but I'm not only visual, it's pretty even when it comes to my visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. But there's some people who dominate in one area or another.
Okay.
So let's use a couple, right? The wife is very kinesthetic and the husband is very visual. You want her to see what you're saying, and she's feeling like you don't feel how she's feeling because she wants you to feel her and you're seeing, and it's like a cross in communication, right? So even as a practitioner, I have to be mindful of that. I pay attention to what the client is saying so I know the best means to communicate with them and build rapport, right? So that there's not a break in the opportunity for them to experience healing. In addition to that, recognizing or helping them to recognize how those patterns link to the emotions that they've been holding on to their body, right? And when they're able to release that, when they're able to create space for that after the Reiki session, it helps to eliminate or get rid of some of the, not some, it helps to eliminate the blockages so that there's more space created in the body so you have a deeper awareness of what your actions, how your actions are linked to your thoughts, right? Because for most people, we're doing it subconsciously and we're not aware. When you do a Reiki session, when you experience a Reiki session, and now you're able to link, this happened to me, which caused me to think this about my, which now I know I've been storing it here all along. I'm empowered now to reverse that, right? So with the help of some strategies in NLP, right? Continuous Reiki sessions, the combination of that. And like I mentioned, I use floral remedies as well, which again address those same things, alleviating some of the emotions that we hold on to. It's just so magnificent to me how the remedies themselves help to do so in such a way that I don't have to keep I don't have to keep revisiting the trauma. That's something else. You asked me about therapy. That's another thing. All right. It's not the necessity to keep going back to the trauma. Coaches are about helping you from this point to move forward, right?
Okay.
It is my belief that if you keep revisiting the trauma, all you're doing is reinforcing it and you're building momentum towards what is not wanted, sorry. All right? But once you recognize the pattern, the belief, not only are you empowered, but okay, where are we going with this? If it's coming up now, if you're being triggered, it only means that there's something that wasn't addressed. We're not going back to keep digging this hole. We want to recognize what is this presenting itself to you so that you can use it to move forward. Make sense?
Absolutely, because I am the solution-based plan of action guy. And I
Mm.
always say, and especially as of late, for example, in Clubhouse, we have a lot of these mental health rooms. That's where you and I met. And some of these rooms are set up to where it's almost like a regurgitation
Yes.
all the time about the same stuff. It becomes a trauma dump. It becomes a bitch
Mhm.
fest. And I say, I would like for us to dialogue. We've got a dialogue about a solution-based plan or plans of action regarding
Right.
ABC 1, 2, 3.
Right.
We're not going to do that. I'm out. I'll leave quietly. I'd rather sit at home watching something on Netflix and picking the
Mhm.
wind out of my belly button because it's
Yeah.
just it, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're actually re-traumatizing that person over and over again. Now, it does not mean that you don't have to talk about those things, and you may have to
Mhm.
talk about them a number of times. We're not
Yes.
even talking about that part. We're just saying that if it's just a constant revisiting, constant revisiting, and you're not doing anything to, okay, here's what the issue is, here's what we talked about in this session or this date or at this time, here's the plan of action to take one step forward away from that. The next
Mhm.
time, here's the same issue, here's a different point of view of it, or here's a different thought about it that triggered me, that traumatized
Mhm.
me, or whatever. How do I deal with that? You say, here's what we're going to do, and that's what we do. Next session, same issue, maybe coming from another part of the spectrum of that trauma. And here's how we do a plan of action to eliminate, minimize, whatever you want to call it. That's how modalities should work. But we don't see that a lot. And this is
Yes.
why I like talking to people like yourself who have these different modalities, especially dealing with metaphysics, because metaphysics is something that's been around for ages, but
Mhm.
we're really incorporating it now into the common modalities that deal with these traumas like domestic violence and sexually based offenses. This is why it's so important for me to talk to subject matter experts like you and other people that I've invited on the podcast. And again, if you have been triggered by anything that has been said here, call 911 for starters. There's a number of numbers, I should say, that we have that will be published for the podcast for violence, domestic violence specifically, sexual abuse, trafficking, uh, the three different Al-Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous and uh, Narcotics Anonymous for substance abuse related issues. If there's suicidal ideation issues, you can call 911 and or you can call 988, which is the suicide number that the government has set up, will be available July 16th, so next Saturday. It will be nationwide. And also people like yourself who have a website, you have your IG that talk about these things. You're on Clubhouse and these Clubhouse streets, as we call them, and other social media platforms. There's so much help out there. I want to facilitate the dialogue and the modalities all together. And that's part of
Mhm.
why the Trigger Wanna Talk podcast assembles and correlates and invites and has the structure in place to where, hey, you know what? You can talk to a person like Gerald. You can talk to John Doe. You can talk to Jane Doe. You can talk to all these different people because this is their lane. Oh, you don't like that? Here's another lane for you to go into. Oh, you don't like that? Here's another lane for you to go into. We want to eliminate the barriers to mental health. I say there's three barriers: the stigmas, the taboos, and the stereotypes. Especially in melanated folks, because I would say if you meet somebody for the first time, here's a great icebreaker question. Ask them, when you hear the term mental health crisis, what's the first word that comes to your mind? Geraldine, if I had $1 for every time somebody said crazy, my bank account would look like
Mhm.
it looked
Mhm.
like Elon Musk. So you either get crazy, lunatic, insane. One of those
Man.
three, you get all of them. You might get a combo of them. They might flip them around or whatever.
Yep.
But when it comes to mental health, we have those negative twos that
Yeah.
you talk about, even with the triangle. What my triangle is? That iceberg that we talked about. Same,
Mhm.
the 10% that you see, the 90%, which is like the base of the pyramid, is under the water. That's where all the shame, the guilt, the trauma,
Mhm.
the judgment, all of those things lie underneath the surface. And that's where you got to get to. You got to get to the
Yeah.
root, the foundation. Hey, you need some scuba gear because we're going to deep dive. Do you want to flip the iceberg upside down? Because we're going to bring it here in your face, not in a not in a manner that is going to traumatize you more,
Right.
traumatize you less. So
Right.
this is why I love talking to you and other people that do what you do. I want to wrap it up in saying I got two more questions.
Sure.
One, because this is our shameless plug section. How can people reach you? And we'll have your contact information listed in the show notes. But what's the best one or two ways that people can connect with you for whatever you do? And what do you have coming down the pipe as far as in events and summits? Are you traveling now that we're getting closer to this herd immunity? Like, here's your shameless plug section.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So the easiest way to reach me is on Instagram.
Okay.
Constant flow underscore
This is
BWC.
BWC. Yeah, BWC.
All right. I'm just making sure that my
And like I said, we'll have all that
hold
listed
on.
in the show notes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure my computer was connected. Constant flow underscore BWC
Okay.
on Instagram. All right. Just send me a message saying consultation and you get to book a 45-minute consultation with me. Okay. Um, Once you connect with me on Instagram, you have access to my YouTube page where I post videos in discussion with individuals or sometimes awarenesses and tips like what we spoke about today to help people to shift to a place of alignment. It's all about alignment and flow. Okay. I also run a clubhouse room
Yes.
on Sundays, 12 o'clock Central, 1 o'clock Eastern. It's called Be Well, Step Up and Thrive. Again, we talk about all things spirituality and flow when it comes to your energy space and your body. All right.
Okay.
And so that's my room on Clubhouse. Um, I will be starting in the next few weeks. I'll be hosting uh, Coaching with Constant Flow Monday night, free coaching. You'll be able to book that on Eventbrite, and the link will be posted on Instagram as well. All right. And there's more in the pipeline, but by the time you're posting this, I will send you the information so you have it. All right.
I wanna apologize to you and all the viewers that are gonna be watching this. I don't know what's going on right now. I don't have allergies, but like everything is draining right now. Like my eyes are
Oh,
watering and all this stuff. or whatever. So if you watch this and you see tears coming out, I was not sad or
You were
triggered,
crying.
you know, no. And I wanted to do another NLP session. We might have to do a part two and do
Okay.
that because that was awesome. And
Yeah.
it took me hours to eat that pot roast, Jerrilyn. I'm telling you, hours. I told Mrs. LP, I said, you know what? I'm not messing with Jerrilyn no more. You know, and if I do, it's gonna be a while because I got to get mentally ready for NLP. I wasn't ready. That's okay. I wasn't ready. That's
Exactly.
all.
So
You know,
when you said that to me, I said one of the things which we did that, but
Mhm.
it has to be a strong willingness, right?
Yeah,
The strong willingness on your part wasn't there, right? You're like,
yeah,
yeah, I want to eat less of this, right? And so we did that. But when it comes to someone who's like, this thing is controlling me and I feel powerless against it, I ask the question, right,
sure,
directed to their subconscious mind. Is it okay for your subconscious mind to release this particular thing, right? So they have to ask themselves, ask their inner being, is it okay? Is it time? Are we ready to do this?
yeah.
And then agree it is time. When you say yes, it's done.
It's done.
It's
No,
done.
that
It's
is
just about reorganizing the connection that you have made to that thing. And I tell you, it's not just so I may be a little biased, but I don't eat meat, right?
okay.
And I'm one of those people who think that I could make probably not tofu, but I could make you some gluten meat that tastes just like chicken and you won't know the difference because that thing has no flavor apart from the flavor you put in there. It's not about the taste. It's about the association that we make with that thing, right? And that's all NLP involves. Disorganizing that pattern, right? So that we can move to a place where we move towards more acceptable behaviors, acceptable desires, acceptable habits, right? And it's so much more that we didn't talk about, but like I said, somebody can book a free consultation and we can talk more. Or we can always talk about it another time.
That's right. And you heard her say it. It's a free consultation on the initial. So definitely we're gonna have your is it okay, so on IG it's constant flow underscore boy
Be
water Charlie BWC.
correct,
And
correct,
then on the web is ninconstantflow.com.
correct,
We'll
correct.
have those links listed. Geraldine, I got one last question for you before we
Oh,
go to
one more. And on Clubhouse,
yeah,
go like the house, be well, step up and thrive. Um, you
be
spoke
well
about the
simple.
room. Yes. You spoke about the room that you met me in. That was also on Fridays. My good friend, who's a hypnotherapist, Stacy, she hosts the room on Fridays that I co-moderate in there as well.
Stacy Carr.
Yes,
Okay, I
on
got to get
Friday.
her. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've been kind of missing each other and stuff, but I definitely want to get her on the
she's
podcast.
a great person.
Yes. Here's the last question for you.
Sure.
If you could write a letter or an email to your younger self,
Hmm.
or whatever, what would you say?
Hmm. Side note, that's part of the process that I did to help me to release that 4-year-old self before even coming into NLP. But I would tell my younger Jerrilyn, you're doing okay. There's nothing wrong about you. There's nothing wrong about him. There's nothing wrong about the situation. You came into this world to experience this, and it's going to make you thrive. And you're going to help so many people as a result of your experience. You're going to work through this. It's going to be fun, not always exciting. You'll cry sometimes, but it's okay because you're going to work through this and it's going to be fun. And so many people will come to their own alignment because you were willing to do this work. So you're okay. You're good. I give her a nice hug and let her know you're doing Great.
See, it's gonna be a while before you and I talk because you almost got me. Like you almost got me. You almost got me. You almost got me. Okay, look, I want to thank you for joining the Trigger One to Talk. I got to get you out of here because you're not gonna. Damn, man.
So I have a
Woo!
friend. I have a friend who, when we speak, she told me you Jerrilyn them.
Mm. Oh, that was. Mm. Okay, look, we're gonna talk later, sometime this week. I'm
Sure.
sure. I want to invite you anytime. Honestly, like sincerely, you're always welcome to come back. We're gonna do some
Thank
Reiki
you.
next time. Maybe we'll do NLP or whatever. This might be just an ongoing thing because again, we're talking about channeling triggers to triumphs using Reiki and NLP, and you also have other modalities that
Yes.
you focus on. And so we'll talk about those next time. But until then, I want to wish you peace and blessings be upon you and your family forevermore.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You're
That's
welcome.
Jerrilyn Fabien. I'm telling you guys, check in with her. She's serious and she is just somebody who has a heart of gold and she wants to help people. Seek help. And that's the primary focus on this podcast. Jerrilyn, thank you so much. I will talk to you later.
Thank you. And I appreciated being on your show.
Absolutely. Take care.
Okay then. Bye.
Bye. So we're going to focus on our last segment, which is our missing persons component. That is a melanated man, woman, or child. This case is something that, when I do these stories, LP loves all the non-grown kids. I've said that before. I'll say it again. You guys always hear me say that. Now, when they hit 18, it's like a whole nother conversation. But seriously, folks, this story is about a young girl. Her name is RELISHA Rudd. And Mrs. LP, who does our missing persons cases, she always gives me a number of cases every week. She was born October 29th in '05, and she disappeared March 1st in 2014. She went missing in Washington, D.C. on February of 2014 at the age of 8. So we're talking about a little girl. Has not been found. She was living in the D.C. General Shelter with her mom, and she was befriended by a janitor named Khalil Tatum, who was a former felon. Rudd stopped attending school, but she was 18 days before her absence was reported by the police, or to the police, I should say. An investigation revealed that her last sighting had been weeks prior when she was caught on camera with the janitor Tatum at an area hotel. Tatum's wife was found shot dead in a hotel in Prince George's County in Maryland, so in the DMV area, in mid-March of that year. And at the end of March, searchers found Tatum's body in a shed in the Kenilworth Park in Aquatic Gardens. It looked like an apparent suicide. The case of RELISHA Rudd received little coverage outside of the DC area, leading to criticism that her case receives little attention due to her marginalization as a Black girl from an impoverished family. This is why we focus primarily on melanated Black and brown men, women, and children on this podcast because of the marginalization, the energy, and the same media coverage that are given to non-Black and brown men, women, and children. We want to bring to the forefront when it comes to those individuals that we are going to be talking about here. I'm going to play a news clip real quick that I got from YouTube. This talks about RELISHA Rudd's story. So bear with me for a second here while I pull it up.
So many of us have never forgotten her solemn little face and her big brown eyes.
The disappearance of RELISHA Rudd shined a light on the cracks in a system that allowed an 8-year-old child to be missing for more than 2 weeks before police were notified.
News 4's Jackie Benson was in Northeast D.C. tonight as community members marked the 8 years since she vanished.
This case is so important. All of them are. Yes. But this one right here.
This age progression shows what RELISHA Rudd might look like now. She'd be 16. She was just 8 years old on March 1st, 2014, the last confirmed sighting of the little girl. Khalil Tatum, a custodian at what was then the district's shelter for families, was able to take her to his home and later to a motel in Northeast D.C. No one, not her family, not staff at the shelter or her school, reported her missing until March 19th. Searchers repeatedly, desperately combed parks in Northeast D.C. where she was last seen. Tatum, the custodian, was later found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but RELISHA was never found. A neon missing persons display near New York Avenue and Bladensburg Road shows her photo, along with that of Devontae Richardson, missing from the district since 2020.
I have days I think she's alive, and I have days I think that she's no longer with us. And I say that all the time, but dead or alive, we got to keep moving and keep pushing until we can confirm something.
D.C. police say the case remains open.
Until we bring RELISHA home, every new lead that we get, we're going back and we're reinvigorating some of the older information that we received, but we will continue to investigate until we have conclusion.
RELISHA Rudd's disappearance was the beginning of the long process of closing the family shelter at the old D.C. General Hospital. It was finally shut down in 2018. Jackie Benson, News 4.
There is a $50,000 reward for information leading to the location and return of RELISHA Rudd.
So, I want to thank my guest today, Jerrilyn Fabien. She is from ConstantFlow.com, InConstantFlow.com, Reiki Master, NLP practitioner, among all the other things that she does in the realm of mental health regarding domestic violence, sexually based offenses, and more. Also, I want to post that link to that story of RELISHA Rudd in the comment section under the missing persons section for the notes here on the audio and the video portion of this podcast. I want to thank everybody sincerely for your time. I am your host, LP. Remember, live in awareness, don't live in fear. Always, always, always take care of yourself and your families. LP out.